So this is the setup I've decided to keep. There's a DAW side with Logic, and then there's an analog side with a tape deck, but I do have Logic going to the mixer. It took a lot of doing because I was trying to figure out an easy way to not have to parse all the tracks for every song every time, but you do have to do that. Or I found it complicated because in the I/O labels, you cannot change the outputs. The main stereo outs of Logic are 1 and 2, no matter what. They're just routed to monitor left and right. So you have to offset the numbers and call output 3 and 4 1 and 2. It doesn't really matter because there's so many outputs and so many virtual outputs. You can say anything is anything. And for a while, I just wasn't sure where it was going to show up. You know, in the analog days, you could actually see a physical console, see a plug, put it in a socket, and see where something is plugged into. But the virtual world I was finding quite confusing, especially since I was makeshifting this whole thing. I have 2 Apollos. One has regular outputs 1 through 8. They're in my patch bay. Then I bought an aphex converter that's doing ADATs out 1 through 8. And then on my second Apollo, I'm doing the same thing. I have 8 more outputs into my patch bay and 9 through 16, these extra outputs of the ADAT going to a second aphex digital converter and going off into my mixer. Because the aphex converters can actually come back and be plugged directly into the mixer, I don't have to route them to assign where they're going to come up. They come up in the right places. I just have to parse them out of Logic correctly. So I have them coming to my little faders. And then in the bottom faders, I have the regular 1 through 16 outputs coming there. And what I'm working on is actually having the mixer bring up whatever I want in the same place so that I keep routing them to the same place and I reach for them on the mixer in the same place. If I route them out of Logic the same way to the right channels, things will start looking familiar and I can start feeling a little bit more comfortable for where things are returning. I'm actually tracking, writing the songs, recording myself playing all the instruments, and having some friends over to play some instruments sometimes. I have to be able to engineer and play and reach things. And when I first started with some of this outboard gear, like I have some really nice pieces of gear from Tegeler and other output pieces of gear, I was labeling those as you see them here: the Tegeler Cream, my regular Distressors, the Tegeler Reverb. Because when you do the I/O, you can actually see the name of it. So if you go down to Utility, put in an I/O plugin, you can then call up and see that you can get your pair of Distressors or whatever you want to output to. So I didn't want to change those names as well. So things have to be labeled for me as outputs and inputs. You know, they're the outputs 9 through 16, but they're also these things if I want to do the I/O. Today I was recording with one microphone, playing 2 different acoustic guitars and going right through this mixer using these preamps and this EQ. Sometimes I'm working through my Tegeler channels, and they're like having a channel strip. So I have this recording channel, and I have their updated recording channel. Because it's such a makeshift setup, not many people can actually answer my questions and help me because they're either not familiar with Logic, or they don't have the Apollos, or they don't have those aphex converters, or they don't have an Audient mixer. They don't know how my patch bay is set up. There's a lot of moving parts, I should say, and a lot of question marks. So there were a lot of things to figure out by myself, and it's been exciting. It's been a lot of months, and I have figured out a lot of things. Sometimes, because it's 2 different Apollos, people have told me it's a clocking issue. But Vintage Audio told me it's probably not a clocking issue. It's probably a conversion issue. So every once in a while I have some delay between the two machines. And it's like, do I want to take these outputs and actually assign them to these outs to get it over to the mixer, or do I actually want to send a bus over there? I went on the bus route because it created separate outputs. And that way, if I didn't want to work on the mixer, or it was too soon to work on the mixer, since I'm just using it for analog summing and the final touches of EQ and doing all the detailed EQ in here, I would still be able to hear something come out my regular 1 and 2 outputs. That's the problem. You can't have it come out both if you're assigning them someplace else. So by using a bus, I was able to keep this audio able to come out on the DAW side of my studio, and I could also route things at the same time. So I almost have a funny surround sound, right? I have the 2 speakers on this side of the room and the 2 speakers on the other side of the room. They could all be working at the same time, which is kind of fun, because originally I thought I was going to get a separate desk and maybe put the mixer in the center of the desk. I've seen a lot of videos where folks have mics coming out of the ceiling, and I went and got some of those attachments and put those in the beams of my ceiling, so I have some overheads or room mics or some things I can count on that don't have stands in the way, because this isn't a very big area. A lot more drums sometimes are around here, and a lot more cymbals, and it gets crowded. I have a snake in the other room that has all my mic inputs going in there, and I have all these different mics around my drum set, and they're going into the mic inputs. So sometimes I'm recording on the piano, and I will open up the front, open up the top, have my Sputnik mics angled wherever I want them, or put some 149s out front with some other stands, and then I can just unplug the XLRs in the back of the mixer and plug those mics in, because those power supplies are on the floor. Some of these pieces of gear I've had a really long time, like this Rane PE17 EQ. I remember having 2 of these in my analog days with my Studio Master console. It was a big 5-foot 32 channel console, and there was no way to cut off the low end to emphasize the birds I was putting in this song, The Garden. I couldn't cut enough. I didn't have any shelving filters. I didn't even know what they were. This was very early days. And so I had these 2 pieces of gear to take care of that shelving EQ. We've gotten so spoiled with plugins now, having everything at our fingertips. It's amazing. I could also get into the computer with these Neve VR channels as preamps and EQ. I have the Portico channel that I can get in through. There's also some warm audio preamps down here. Could get in that way. There's also a real 1073 down here on the bottom. And a puppy dog. Hello, Carly. Carly Simon, what are you doing? I have so many 1/4-inch patch bays that I didn't want to reroute everything. So that's why my I.O. was normaled in the patch bays, and that's why I have to break the normal and then patch out those ADAT outs, the channel outs to the mixer. So every time I want to get those 16 tracks to the mixer, I have to patch those. Not a problem though, because I didn't want to change the desk. I didn't want to get a different desk and make the mixer the center of everything. I kind of like still having both setups. It's crazy. It's a crazy thing, but it's very interesting because it literally is hybrid, and it literally could be either or. And more possibilities are pretty cool. I can also record just on the UA console. You really don't need anything else. You have access to plugins that you can actually record with or just monitor. You could put anything in here that you own that's UA, And you have all of that at your fingertips as well. Various sends, it's like mixer upon mixer upon mixer. redundant, and crazy fun. I was playing with little tape recorders since I was a kid, and made my first album on a 1/2-inch 8-track tape machine. So there was a couple times there where I was getting frustrated with the computer. I thought it'd be really fun to have a tape deck again. I just kind of miss the animal of it, It's fun to play with. I got the little remote control with it so that you could not have to reach down too far all the time. I haven't done a whole song, a whole album on it. I've done whole songs. A lot of times I can just pass audio through it, and because it's returning in different ways on the mixer, I don't even have to print it, really. It's already getting the benefit coming off the other head and going straight to Logic. So that's fun too. Sometimes I'm using the I/O and the outboard gear, just keeping it on a bus, and sometimes I'm actually printing the output of the bus to another audio track so that I could use the piece of gear again. And what gets tricky then is if you have anything on this stereo output bus, that's not going to be going to the Audient. So sometimes I'm not doing anything on this output bus, and I'm going to do it all on the console. The other thing was, once I had too many buses and too many plugins or routing, bus into bus into bus into bus, that's probably when I'm getting most of the delay, because once I bypassed all my plugins and then exported all my audio tracks to a whole new window, not using any of those routings, the delay stopped. Sometimes I just quickly want to get a track in there, starting a song, and I'm not going through anything complicated or doing anything special. But that's also a bit of a beauty of the digital side of things. Right now, we can process the guitar or the voice or whatever as if we were an engineer and not just the player. It's like it's coming through now, and I'm in two places at once, and I can process it the way I want to, print that, and work from there. So lots of options, not a problem, total fun. It's all about the fun and creating art and making sound pictures, sound paintings for me. I've been recording my whole life, like since I'm 11 years old, and didn't jump to Logic till 2005. So lots of fun stuff with all this. I just wanted to have fun, and I always wanted a real studio, and this is where it's at today.